afternoon, and welcome to Hooked on Law with your host, local Salinas attorney John Kloppenstein and his sidekick, Peter Hemming. You have questions, John will have answers. Feel free to call in with your questions at 831-393-0645. And now, John Kloppenstein.
Welcome to Hooked on Law. My name is John Kloppenstein.
And I'm Peter Hemming.
Peter, I'd like to talk a little bit about my week. I had a very interesting week, and Monday I had a case in Monterey that was supposed to start at 9 o'clock in the morning that ended up being continued until 1:30, and then at the same time I had a case in Watsonville at 1:30, and so I was in this sort of major dilemma as to what to do. What would you do, Peter?
Well, I'd bust down the judge's door and say, "What's the big idea of making me wait?" Am I allowed to do that?
Well, you know something, I felt like doing that, actually. However, what happened is that the judge, what I thought, ordered me to come back at 1:30, so I drove all the way up to Watsonville, and I jiggled the door of the courtroom. It was locked. Every courtroom was locked. There was hardly anybody in the courtroom or even in the court area. So I went to the clerk, and I let the clerk know that I was ordered to go back to Monterey. I gave her my card. I said I want a continuance. And then I drove back to Monterey.
How can they do this to you? I don't get this. Aren't these set schedules? Your people, and you're supposed to show up and whatever. And what happens if you don't show up and say, "Well, wait a minute, I was called to go here, and now you tell me to go here"? What can you do about this?
It's a good question.
Yeah,
really a good question. And I'll tell you what, I had filed a substitution of attorney so that I was the representative of my client in Watsonville. And I did let the judge know in Monterey that I had this particular type of case and that I really needed to go to Watsonville and handle that case at 1:30. But I thought I heard him say, "You're ordered back." And so I did the best I could. And what ended up happening is the judge up in Watsonville said I did everything wrong. I didn't contact the opposing attorney. I didn't give the name or the case number or any of those various things. And so what she did, it was a female judge, forced my client, who was a female, to represent herself despite the fact that I had a substitution of attorney on record.
Okay. How can they do that? I mean, it seems to me they're putting you in an awful pickle here.
Well, you're right. I felt like I was a pickle in a sandwich.
Yeah, but a person has a right for counsel, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I was very surprised that the judge forced my client to go forward. Of course, she lost. We're looking at appealing that particular case and that issue. So to be continued, maybe on another show we'll continue talking about this. Now Tuesday, I was up in Santa Clara. I was up in San Jose on a serious criminal case. It was a life case.
Okay.
And
you want to tell us a little about that?
Yeah, well, I do. I want to tell you about it. It was a case that the subject matter is a very controversial subject matter. I really don't want to get into that part of it, but what I was all geared up. I'd worked the whole weekend. Tuesday I was up there right on time, and we had gone through what we call in limine motions, and I come back at 1:30, and the DA tells the judge, "I got to continue the case because the main detective on the case apparently got hurt prior to the trial and was on workers' compensation."
Okay.
And so as a result of that, if that particular detective worked, he would lose his claim and lose his ability to, I guess, have some surgery on his knee.
Right.
So that case ended up getting continued.
Now, is it good or bad for you?
Well, I think it's
not to say I'm glad the guy got hurt, but I mean, yeah.
I think it's bad for the client. I
Yeah.
mean, this particular client has been in jail for over 2 years, and I think it's
No
about
bail.
time.
No bail. Okay.
No bail.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. you got to have some sort of closure.
Yeah.
It's I think he's got a pretty good defense, and he's got a damn good attorney handling it.
Now, on the subject, how long do they keep you in jail before you're tried? Is there a limit, or can they just keep you literally forever?
Well, they're not going to keep you forever. There really isn't a limit. However, I believe there is what they call sort of a fast track, and they put pressure on judges to make sure that these criminal cases are tried in a timely manner.
Yeah. Does anybody ever get lost in the system?
I don't think they get lost in the system, but I think some of these cases are so serious and they require investigation, extensive investigation, that I think what ended up happening is that it does take time in order for the defense to develop a theme and develop some sort of defense of the case. So that's what happened on Tuesday. Wednesday was a holiday. It was Lincoln's birthday.
Oh, okay.
So we didn't have any court.
Okay.
I was able to relax a little bit.
Oh, you did relax. You never relax, do you?
No.
You're always working, aren't you?
I am.
Oh, boy.
I'm working 7 days a week.
Oh, I don't know how you do it, but okay.
Well, I try to stay up on things,
Yeah. Yeah.
And then Thursday was I went back up to Santa Clara to San Jose, and another serious case where I came into the case represented by the public defender. So I made my appearance, and I talked to the client, and that's going to be a very, very difficult case to defend. What I recommend to the audience out there is that keep your flap shut. Don't.
Like I said, keep your mouth.
Yeah.
If you're arrested, keep your mouth shut. Don't say anything.
Right.
And did he say something?
He did.
Oh, okay.
He did. He made some admissions that are going to be very difficult to overcome.
Now, why would a person do that in so serious a case? Just thinking they're going to ease into something, they're going to be forgiven? Is it a psychological thing, or what exactly were you speaking of?
I think what happens is that there's something inside all of us that we know we've done wrong, and sometimes we want to just get that out. We want to sort of get it out, and so even though they give the Miranda warning that look at what you're going to say could incriminate you, they go ahead and they make statements. Or another thing they do is they make telephone calls to their loved ones, to their significant other, and they're recorded.
Right.
And so they make admissions on the telephone, thinking that there's this privacy, and there's no privacy in the jail, and they ended up incriminating themselves.
Yeah. No, there is privacy when you're talking to your attorney, right? They can't listen to that, correct? Or can they?
No, that's private.
Okay.
That's private.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, generally what they do is when you go into the jail, they have a interview room, and you go into an interview room, and you talk to your client. Now, when I send an investigator to like a jail, like up in Santa Clara, which is the Elmwood, which is in Milpitas, he can only talk to the client over the telephone.
Okay.
Now that's recorded.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so he has limited.
Even though attorney-client privilege does not exist when you do that?
Well, when the investigator goes up by himself, if the investigator's with myself, then we're in a room. But if he goes up by himself, he's on a telephone. They won't let him go into a room, and so he's very limited in terms of what he can talk to and what he can say.
Right.
Yeah. And what the client can say.
Okay. Now, what about the fabled jailhouse snitch, or the police putting somebody in your cell to hopefully get a confession? Because it seems like they all talk, and they'll claim they did everything. So what? How good or bad is that?
Well, that's interesting you bring that up, because this particular
I have my moments.
Yeah, you do. On Thursday, when I was up there with the client, and I read the public defender gave me some discovery, the police reports, a few things, and I was reading through it as I was waiting for the judge, and I noticed that he had made this incriminating admission to the police. I told him, look, when you go back to Elmwood, be very careful who you talk to and what you say, because they put these jailhouse snitches in there, and they give them the opportunity to get a reduced sentence by trying to draw out, and sometimes they have them actually wired, and then they try to get information.
Yeah, but how reliable are they? Does it depend on how good or bad the snitch is? If he's a 3-time loser with a string full of felonies, is he going to be listened to as opposed to the guy, the first timer? As if he has to go into court and like that and testify.
Good question.
Yeah.
I think that's where the defense, of course, is going to try to hit hard. They're going to try to hit at the credibility, and that this person is being offered some sort of plea deal in order to do this. And so, what their testimony, if there isn't any sort of recorded testimony, I think it is tainted to some degree. However, I have seen cases where the jury seems to believe these jailhouse snitches when they come in and do testify, because they corroborate a lot of the information that the police have. Mm-hmm. Now, whether or not that's been given to them by the police or that's given to them by the defendant in the jail cell is another question. But if you're charged with a crime and you're arrested, don't say anything to the police. They're not your friend.
Right. You said that the last time.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
okay.
I'm repeating myself.
Well, when I was a little kid, you get in trouble, you go to a policeman. That's what I was always told. But in this instance, you say, no, they're not your friend.
Well, I mean, if somebody's, trying to, stalking you or something, call the police, obviously.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if you're pulled over or you're being arrested for something, and then they start questioning you, don't say anything.
Yeah. Okay. Like that.
Now, I want to just turn our attention a little bit to our guest. We're going to have a guest today.
Right.
His name is Chris Kane. He's an attorney at law, local attorney that does a lot of various things. He helps me out. He's tremendous, and he's going to be talking about how to beat a traffic ticket.
Okay.
Ever gotten a traffic ticket?
Last time was probably 20 years ago, and I'll admit I was speeding. I was going probably 35 in a 20 zone. I wasn't watching, and the guy nailed me. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you fight it?
I just went to traffic court. That's usually what I do.
And you just paid it?
Yeah. Paid the $2.
Oh, that's very,
I think it was $300 when I think of it. But is that, since we're on the subject, maybe you can ask your guest this: is traffic court, when you go to traffic court, is that ticket really expunged from your record, or is it still there?
Well, they're mostly infractions, and
right.
So infractions are not going to show up on a rap sheet.
Okay.
It's only going to be misdemeanors and felonies.
Oh, okay.
So they're not going to show up, only in maybe on a if you go online, it'll show that there's a particular case, and it'll have TR traffic, but they're infractions, and so they're not going to show up on any sort of rap sheet.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
But I'm looking forward to listening to your guest.
We got to take a break.
We do.
Okay.
That's what
Is that what you're trying to say?
That's what I was trying to get at.
Okay. All right.
See you then.
Yeah.
We'll be right back with more of Hooked on Law after these brief messages. Hi, Jim Boston here for the Monterey Chamber of Commerce. If you are looking for a great place to dine in Monterey, like the old Fisherman's Grotto on Fisherman's Wharf, check out MontereyEatPlayAndStay.com. If you are looking for a great place to play in Monterey, like Cannery Row, check out MontereyEatPlayAndStay.com. If you are looking for a great place to stay in Monterey, like the Portola Plaza or the Monterey Tides on the beach next door to Seaside, check out MontereyEatPlayAndStay.com. montereycarlofforce.com. If you are looking for cars, car parts, body shops, car clubs, etc., check out montereycarchannel.com. It's quite interesting and fun. For more great information about Monterey, check out montereycalifornia.us. That's montereycalifornia.us. All of this and more brought to you by the Monterey Chamber of Commerce. Not a member? Join today. Call 394-6501. Hi, Jim Fossen here for the Seaside Chamber of Commerce. If you're looking for a great place to eat in Seaside, like the Googie Grill on Del Monte near Canyon Del Rey, or the Wakatobi Japanese Grill at 1130 Fremont Boulevard, check out SeasideEatAndStay.com. If you're looking for a great place to stay in Seaside, like the Econo Lodge Bay Breeze Inn at 2049 Fremont Boulevard, or the Big Embassy Suites at the corner of Canyon Del Rey and Del Monte, check out SeasideEatAndStay.com. If you're looking for a new or used car, check out SeasideAutoDealers.com, where you'll find BMW of Monterey, Victory Toyota, Lexus Monterey Peninsula, and more. Check out SeasideAutoDealers.com. For more great information about Seaside, check out SeasideCalifornia.us. That's SeasideCalifornia.us. All of this and more brought to you by the Seaside Chamber of Commerce. Not a member? Join today. Call 394-6501. Join local Salinas attorney John Kloppenstein and his sidekick Peter Hemming for KMBY's brand new program, Hooked on Law, live every Saturday at noon. You have questions? John will have answers. You'll be able to call in on our special live line at 831-393-0645 and ask your questions. John will do his best to answer your questions or refer you to someone who can. John will often have special guests who are experts in various areas of law, etc. Make sure you tune into Hooked on Law, Saturdays at noon, right here on KMBY, over the air at 19.4 and streamed on the internet at www.kmbytv.com. Thank you. Welcome back to more of Hooked on Law. And here is your host, John Kloppenstein.
And we're back. We have my guest, Chris Kane. Chris, welcome.
Thank you, John. Thank you for having me.
Sure. I'm glad you're here. By the way, I just want to give the call-in number. If we have any viewers out there that want to ask Chris some questions about how to beat a traffic ticket or any other questions, he's very knowledgeable in a lot of areas. The call-in number is 831-393-0645. Chris, I know this is maybe just a general, but how do you beat a traffic ticket?
Well, the first thing you have to do is fight it. You can't just pay it. And, I mean, number one, fight the ticket. I think maybe even before that, when a person gets a ticket, they can go into the courthouse and ask for an extension. That kicks the can down a road just a little bit of ways, extends the due date down. Then you go in for the arraignment and you start to fight the ticket.
Okay. Now, when you say fight the ticket, what do you mean by that?
Well, there are two ways to do it. There's the hard way and the easy way. The harder way would be to fight it yourself.
Yeah.
The easier way is to hire an attorney to do it.
Right.
Procedurally, the first step on the process of fighting the ticket is what's called an arraignment. You go in, you stand in front of the judge, you get to hear the charges against you. At that point, you can plead guilty. You can ask for traffic school right then, or you can say not guilty and ask for a trial.
Now, if I was to hire you, would that mean that I wouldn't have to actually go into court? Would you go into court for me?
Yes.
Okay. Now, that's a big deal, because if I have a good job and I'm working, then that saves me a lot of time. Would you agree?
Of course. And not only that, but just recently, over the past few weeks, I've had a number of tickets from drivers who were here in August for Car Week. So drivers from out of town, driving their Ferraris, right, their Lamborghinis, their exotic cars, came through Monterey. A number of them got tickets. Then they went back. They went home to San Diego. They went home to New York. They went home to wherever they were from. But they still had this ticket hanging over their head, and they wanted to fight it.
Right.
It's the right thing to do. So they had to hire a local attorney, boots on the ground, to take care of it for them.
Right. Now, I hire you, and let's say, for example, I'm coming from San Luis Obispo County, and I'm going in that area where CHP seems to have a lot of sort of a traffic I don't know what you want to call it, but they're there and they have their radar and all that good stuff. How do you beat, if I was to say I was going 103 miles an hour and I go, Chris, I need to hire you because it's going to be a big fine or whatever. What do you recommend to me?
You're talking about South County on 101. 101 North and South, down in that area, there are a lot of highway patrol officers, and a huge number of my cases come out of that area. And actually, I've gotten to know these officers quite well from going to battle against them regularly.
Okay.
So how do we beat it? I ask for a trial. One of the things I do tactically is I won't waive time. So I demand that the client gets to have their case heard within 45 days.
So you want to explain what not waiving time means?
Of course. So we all have a constitutional right to have our cases heard within a short amount of time.
Right.
And that went back hundreds of years. We didn't want to lock people up and just have them rot in a dungeon, never to get to hear the charges against them. So we have a right to hear the charges, to fight things in a short amount of time. With traffic cases, it's 45 days.
Okay.
If a person says, I'm going to go ahead and waive time, we'll schedule this case at the court's convenience. What I've run into is I say, we'll set the trial. They set it 5-6 weeks out. I show up. The officer called in sick. The officer had training. The judge says, hey, I'm sorry. The officer put in a timely request for a continuance. We'll see you back in a few weeks when the officer's ready. Then I'm going into court over and over again. I see people take a day off work. They come in, officer's sick, they have to come back again. They say, what happened?
Right.
The officer said, or the judge will say, I'm sorry, you waived time. For me, I don't want to have to go to court over and over, give the officer more than one bite at the apple. I don't waive time. I say, listen, you get one chance you show up or you don't show up.
So by not waiving time, that might mean that if the officer has something else going on, then the officer wouldn't show up and then you'd be able to get the case dismissed?
That's exactly what happens. And these officers do have things going on. They have training. They get transferred. They get sick. They have vacation. They go on disability if they get injured on the job. And if they're disabled, they can't drive a cruiser. They can't come into the courthouse. So there are a number of things there. If the officer can't show up, the state has no case against a person. The matter's dismissed.
Do you do that? Does that happen often?
That's one of the best ways to win. It doesn't happen as often as I would like. People think, the officer's not going to show up. They're actually pretty good about showing up. But a fair number of the times that I win is from the officer not showing up.
Well, let's talk about the radar because out in South County you mentioned, and there's a lot of CHP officers using radar. Have you ever had the situation where there's, let's say, two cars, one car in maybe the slower lane, another car in the faster lane, but they're pretty much simultaneously where the radar maybe hits the car that's going a little faster and not the one in the slower lane, but they pull the person in the slower lane over and say you were going over 100 miles an hour?
Yes, and that's one of the reasons why it's great to hire an attorney, because it's hard to know how a radar works. John, you've studied the radar. I've studied the radar. We understand it's a wide beam that covers multiple lanes. It goes maybe 17, 20 degrees out to the left, 17, 20 degrees out to the right. The radar may not discriminate between two vehicles in the number 1 lane and the number 2 lane. So if you ask the officer, well, how do you know which vehicle your radar actually picked up? It's a tough question for them to answer because they have a difficult time aiming it. LiDAR is a different story. LiDAR is a laser device, a handheld device.
You want to explain LiDAR versus the regular radar?
Sure. So with a regular radar, a police cruiser will have a radio emitting antenna. It sends out the radio wave. That goes out and bounces off vehicles. It bounces off the ground. They can measure the vehicle speed. They can measure the speed of vehicles traveling in the same direction, the opposite direction. It's fairly sophisticated. LiDAR is a handheld device. You'll see a motorcycle officer with a LiDAR device. It looks like a gun or a large hair dryer.
I've seen that. Right.
And that shoots out a laser. They'll be very, very accurate with where they aim that. They try to aim it at maybe the vehicle's license plate will give them a good reading.
Okay. Now, you talked about arraignment. What's the next step from the arraignment? Does that go directly to a trial, or is there any sort of pre-trial that you would do, or with that talking to, let's say, the officer or the district attorney's office or anything like that prior to the trial?
So with a criminal case, a misdemeanor or a felony, the district attorney will be involved. Modernly in Monterey County, the district attorney is not involved. So for my cases, it goes from arraignment to trial. Now, a number of things will happen behind the scenes between the arraignment and the trial.
All right, tell us about that.
One of those things is discovery. So discovery is the defense's opportunity, my opportunity to see all of the evidence the police will want to present against my client.
Okay.
So I write them a letter. I say, send me all of the officer's training. Send me the records that show that this machine has been properly calibrated. Send me everything I may need to know, and I'll look through all of that. I'll look at both sides of the ticket and look for different errors that the officer may have made. Maybe the machine wasn't properly calibrated or maintained, and based on that, I might be able to get a dismissal.
Now, wouldn't you agree that's another thing why to hire an attorney? Because generally, if you were just a layperson, you probably wouldn't really know about that, and you wouldn't know how to do a discovery request and actually look at the discovery and be able to maybe pull a little something out of your hat. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, it takes a trained eye. And I'd even back up. I would say that you should hire an attorney prior to that. I have a good friend who's a police officer, and he says, my tickets never go to traffic court because I sell them so well. He convinces the people that he pulls over that they're guilty. And they think, what's the point of fighting this?
Right. Sure.
Well, there's a great point in fighting it. You might win.
Right.
There's a fair chance you can win. But the people on the side of the road, they think, maybe I was guilty. My client's, I probably was speeding. I say, well, that doesn't mean you're guilty.
That's true.
It doesn't mean you're guilty.
Right.
They need to prove this.
Right.
Just getting pulled over doesn't prove it. So you need a trained eye to look at all of those records that the police have. You need a trained eye to look at the citation. It could have been an error in the citation. Right. There's any number of things that gone wrong. And just a layperson on the side of the road, they might just think they're guilty and they pay it.
Right. And you've been doing this for a long time, or for how long have you been an attorney?
I've been an attorney for about 10 years now.
Okay.
Maybe a little over a decade.
Okay, so you've been looking and been doing this for a long time. So you have the trained eye that can look and see the discovery, and you have the ability at a trial to cross-examine. Isn't that what you do? You'd cross-examine the police officer?
So at the actual trial, the judge calls up the defendant and the police officer, or the defendant's attorney and the police officer. And like you said, the person who got the ticket may not even need to show up if they hire a lawyer.
Right.
The police have the burden of proof. They go first. The officer reads his narrative. He has good notes. If it's highway patrol, they do a pretty good job. They know what they're going to say. They read through all of their script. They say, at this time, at this date, I pulled over this person based on these facts. Then I have an opportunity to ask some questions. Well, were there other vehicles on the road traveling in that same direction? Mm-hmm. Well, was it raining? Well, isn't it true that rain can affect your radar's accuracy? And we'll go through all of the factors, and I'll look for reasonable doubt or look for problems and look for a dismissal.
Do you ever bring in an expert witness in any of these cases, or is that over the top? What do you think?
I don't know about bringing an expert witness for a traffic case. That's a very good tactic for maybe a DUI case if there's a dispute over the level of alcohol in their blood or something along those lines. But for a traffic case, expert witnesses can be expensive. Expert witnesses may not be necessary for a traffic case.
What about bringing in a former police officer who's, used this radar for years and years and years and can look over the discovery and then come in and testify that maybe there's something wrong with the radar or something that the officer did wrong in using the radar?
If you know a police officer who does that, I'd love to meet him.
Okay.
A former police officer who does that. I think that that's something that I've done behind the scenes with medical experts in other types of cases that say this wasn't a good blood draw for the DUI case. Not to get too into a discussion of DUI cases, but those experts I've used for other types of cases. For traffic cases, for radar cases, there are some published materials that I rely on. And one of the ones that's been most useful to me is the handbook on how to use the radar, the Stalker 2 dual band radar unit, and reading through that. Mm-hmm. And the officer will give a testimony. I used the assigned tuning forks prior to my shift to calibrate the radar or to make sure that it was properly calibrated. And I'll ask the officer, well, how far away did you stand? Well, the distance.
Good.
Well, how far away is that distance? Well, doesn't the manual say to stand this far away? And they'll say, yes. How many tuning forks did you use? Did you use the faster one first or the slower one first? And they'll kind of fudge it, and they'll say, well, doesn't the manual say to use them both at the same time? And the officers may not have read that manual since they went through their police academy.
Now, let me ask you this. Now, let's say you use this manual. Do you then submit pages of the manual to the commissioner and then try to argue that at closing argument, or how do you use that information?
Some things can be submitted into evidence that are directly related. One thing recently was the records for, it was a traffic case, but it had to do with a DUI. It was a minor who had a blood alcohol 0.05 or greater. And one of the pieces that went into evidence was the calibration log for the PASS device, the passive alcohol screening device the officer used on the side of the road. Mm-hmm. Got those calibration logs into evidence showing that device actually had a margin of error of a few 1/100ths, and the driver was only above by 1/100th or 2/100ths. Mm-hmm. So the argument was, once we got that in showing that this particular device wasn't particularly reliable, the argument was that at the time of the stop, it may not have given a proper reading. And it was within the range that this thing showed inaccuracies. So how can the state find this person guilty when the range of the device is beyond the level that they showed up?
Yeah, that's very interesting. Now, I know you've been doing some pretty interesting things over there in the Marina Courthouse regarding a point, the commissioner and what sort of been going on there, and you've been doing 170.6s on the commissioner. I don't want to get too much into that, but do you have some strategy as to why you're doing that?
Well, 170.6 motions are a preliminary motion where you disqualify the judicial officer from being able to hear the cases. The shortest way to say that is that my clients deserve a fair trial, and I deserve a fair referee. And if there is a reason why I think the referee, the judge, may not be fair, maybe I've appealed their case, maybe we've gotten into an argument and I feel like maybe I stepped on their toes or I was a little too zealous for my client, that I think moving forward I might need a different referee to hear my cases. What I've done, filing those 170.6 motions, I've removed my client's cases from this particular courthouse or this particular referee. So sometimes they'll go to the real courthouse, the main courthouse in Salinas, or sometimes we'll bring in a guest judge into the Marina Courthouse to hear the cases.
Now, I know that by doing that, you were stacking these cases on like one particular day, and you were doing like 10 of these trials all at one time, and it was very effective because you were able to get a number of the cases dismissed because the officers didn't know which courthouse to go to or what really was going on. Is that true?
Well, I hate to use the word tricks, but there's a million different tricks we can use as defense attorneys to win a case. There's a million different ways that the state can make an error that helps us get the best outcome for our clients. So what I was doing is I would set these trials on certain dates. There's only so many judges, and I'd need a particular judge to hear the case. Backing up a little bit on the way things work in Monterey County, if you get a ticket from a highway patrol officer whose last name starts with the letter A through M, that trial is probably going to be on Monday morning at 10:45.
Okay.
Last name M through Z, that's going to be on Wednesday at 1:30 in the afternoon. There are tables that are worked out. If it's a Pacific Grove officer, it's on a different day. If it's a Monterey officer, it's on a different day. These things have been worked out with all the sergeants from the various police departments so they can make sure that all of their officers are available to go and testify at these trials.
Okay.
Now, the tactic I've been using, one of the unintended and pleasant side effects of what I've been doing is that kind of throws a monkey wrench in their scheduling. So either I'm going to a different courthouse that the officers aren't accustomed to going to at a different time of the day, 8:30 in the morning, they don't get to sleep in, or it's at a different day of the week, a different time, and I'll go in there, it'll be me on one side of the courtroom, 14 officers on the other side of the courtroom, and I'll just go to battle and do one case after another the entire afternoon.
That's fun. That sounds like a lot of fun.
It's an uphill battle, but it is fun.
Yeah. And I remember you telling me that one officer went to the main courthouse when he should have been at the Marina Courthouse, and as a result, since he wasn't there, this guest judge dismissed the case.
That happens, yes.
So, why do I want to hire you? I mean, tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you into law.
Well, I think that what I was just saying shows that I'm not here to make friends with the officers. Sometimes I've had friendships develop. I'm not here to make friends with them. I'm here to advocate for my clients.
Yeah.
And if that means that I might upset the judge or I might turn over the apple cart, I don't mind.
Right.
I have thick skin. I'm here to fight for the clients.
Great.
So that's the core of what I'm doing and who I am as a criminal defense attorney.
Okay.
As
Now, do you have an office, or and where is your office?
It's in Salinas, 210 Capitol, but I'm mostly in the courthouses. I go to court almost every single day of the week. I'm in court in the morning and I'm in court in the afternoon. I have dozens of cases every single week and I'm in there all the time. So I'd be more likely to be found in a courtroom than in an office.
So how would I get a hold of you if I had a traffic ticket and I wanted to hire you? How would I get a hold of you?
Well, you can give me a call or send me an email. I do have a website, and I think it's chriskainlaw.com. That's the website I've been using, but my phone number is on the State Bar website.
Okay, and you want to give the viewers your phone number?
It's area code 831-236-9145.
Okay. And now you said that you do other things than traffic tickets. You handle misdemeanors?
I handle misdemeanors. I have 2 active felony cases right now and a number of DUI cases.
Okay.
But about half my load is traffic and the other half is split among real criminal cases.
Okay. So tell us a little about some of these misdemeanor cases you've been handling.
Well, my bread and butter has been these DUI cases. And that has a similar pattern where a person gets a citation, they have an arraignment, there's a process of discovery where we get to review the evidence against them, and then ultimately pretrial and maybe a trial to fight that ticket at the highest level.
Okay. And you did say earlier about having an expert eye and going through the discovery, and so you want to explain a little bit of that with the DUI versus the traffic?
Of course. So there are a number of ways to attack the state's case with a DUI. The first one that's coming to mind right now, and you mentioned an expert, I have an expert who's a registered nurse, who's was a phlebotomist, then became a nurse. And that person will review the video of the blood draw. We'll make sure that the blood draw was correct. There's certain little things with the blood draw. One of them is when the blood goes into the vial, they have to shake it back and forth, side to side, to make sure the anticoagulant and the preservative mixes properly with the blood.
Right.
If that doesn't happen, you can get some bacterial growth, some fungal growth, some alcohol that will form naturally in that blood. This is just one little example that comes to mind that the state can mess this up. So when you have an expert to review that video, to review that blood draw, they can find all of those different ways. I also have an expert who reviews the traffic stop. If the officer has a badge cam going and they watch the person get out of the vehicle, do the test, the walk and turn, horizontal gaze nystagmus, the balance test, the modified Romberg test, is that correct?
Yeah, I think so.
Mixing up the name there, and they want to make sure that all of those things were done correctly. Otherwise, the officer's just making up those tests as they go.
So the point you're making with the blood, now, to back up a little bit, there's blood and then there's the breath. So you have the BA, which is the PAS, where they blow into this device, or they take you to a hospital and then they do a blood draw, right?
That's right.
Okay. So in your opinion, which one's more accurate in terms of the blood draw versus the BA, the PAS?
I want to see the blood draw. If you do the blood draw, we can follow the molecule. I think it's more accurate. I just prefer that.
Okay. And when you mean prefer it, you mean that's something that you can attack as this advocate?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. And you use this phlebotomist nurse to review some sort of some video or something where they're showing the blood draw?
Yes.
Okay. And is that a normal kind of thing where they will videotape the blood draw and give you that as discovery?
Yes. So with discovery, we request all of the evidence that the state can produce against the defendant.
Okay.
We can also ask for additional evidence that they might not want to produce, like the maintenance logs for the machine that check the blood alcohol content of the blood itself.
Okay.
So if we look at that machine and we see that it hasn't been maintained in the past 8 months and it should be maintained every 3 months, well, there might be a problem there. There might be some growth in that machine that causes some inaccuracies. So we ask for everything that they could possibly use and drill down on each individual thing to look for errors.
Well, Chris, it's been great having you here. You're obviously very knowledgeable, and I recommend you. I wouldn't have you here on this show if I didn't think that you're a super attorney, and you've been very helpful for me. So we're going to take a break now, and we're going to bring Peter back. But thanks a lot, Chris. Appreciate it.
Thank you, John. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, bet.
We'll be right back with more of Hooked on Law after these brief messages.
Another public service announcement from
KMBY.
Mark your calendar for Tuesday, February 18th at 7 p.m. for a free, yes, free concert at the Church of the Oaks in Delray Oaks, featuring Rick Price and the New Legacy Project live from Nashville. Plan to come early for best seating. For more information about these entertainers, check out newlegacyproject.com. You can hear them at a free concert on Tuesday, February 18th at 7 p.m. at the Church of the Oaks at 841 Rosita Road in beautiful Delray Oaks.
Hello?
Hello?
Hey, this is Grady over here at Rankin Safe.
Oh, it's you.
Hey, you bought a car from us last week. We just want to know how your experience was.
Well, it was terrible. Your people were rude. When I came to pick up the car, I had to wait for hours, and I stood there in the rain, and then the
That's
car
nice.
finally came. Well, it was dirty, and it smelled like a sock.
We aim
and
to
then when I
please.
got in the car...
Tired of being badgered? For a better way and a better deal, come to the Seaside Auto Center in Seaside.
Jose's Mexican Restaurant and Grill. Come and treat yourself to a refreshing margarita. Experience the warm, delicious taste of Mexico. They use only the finest ingredients and so affordable that you can bring the whole family. Jose's Mexican Restaurant, a family favorite in Seaside on Del Monte and Broadway. Local and family owned. Come and let the Maldonado family serve you.
Welcome back to more of Hooked on Law. And here is your host, John Kloppenstein.
We are back, and Peter's back with me. And what I want to do, Peter, is I want to talk a little bit about what Chris Kane mentioned. First of all, what he's been doing, which I think is a very interesting and unique thing, is that he's been filing what we call these 170.6s on a particular judge over there at the Marina Courthouse.
Okay.
Do you know what that means, what a 170.6 is?
No, I wasn't paying attention.
You weren't? Oh. I figured that.
Refresh us.
Okay, I'd like to. What that means...
Actually, I was talking to his girlfriend, but, you know.
Oh, yeah. He's got a very attractive girlfriend.
Yes, he does.
And what that means is that it's you don't have to have any sort of particular reason. You just feel that there's some prejudice that this particular judge is... and you don't have to put it in any sort of, it's just a brief paper that you file. And what Chris was doing is he was filing these 170.6s on every one of his cases. And what happens is then that particular commissioner that's over there in Marina couldn't hear the case. It excludes her from being able to hear the case. And so what was going on was that these cases were then being sent back to Salinas. Now, there isn't any sort of judge over in Salinas that has the time or energy that wants to really listen to any of these traffic cases. And so what was happening is then they were being sent back to Salinas, and then there were these random judges from Salinas main courthouse coming to Marina, and then he was stacking all these cases. And so he would have 10, 12, 14 cases going from morning to afternoon, and a lot of times the officers weren't showing up.
Yeah.
And so he was getting a number of cases dismissed as a result of this tactic that he was using.
Yeah. Now, I've always heard the story of, if your inclination, if you don't want to pay the ticket, go to court, because I always hear 99 times out of 100, the officer's not going to show up.
Well, in a big city, I think you're right.
Yeah.
If you're in Los Angeles or San Francisco, San Diego, some of the big cities where these officers are being moved around and they're doing a lot of different things, I think that's really, really a good point. But as you heard from Chris, he felt it was very important to hire a lawyer, and I think it is too, because one, it saves you a lot of time. You're working, you're doing your job, and, the last thing you want to do is have to go over to the Marina Courthouse, stand in line, wait around, wait for your case to be called. Because, if you have a lawyer, your case is going to be called immediately. It's the first case called, and you're saving time. And as you heard, having an expert eye to look over the discovery is critical. Okay. Do you have an expert eye?
If I'm paying a guy, a lawyer, X amount of money, I expect him to have the expert eye.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. I thought, so if you had, let's say hypothetically, you get a traffic ticket.
Who, me?
Yeah. Let's say you're
Honest Pete.
Yeah. You're speeding out in the hinterlands of Monterey County.
Okay.
You're driving because you think you're all alone, and you're listening to Hotel California, and you're hitting the accelerator. All of a sudden, you're going 100 miles an hour, and you get pulled over by the CHP.
Doesn't everybody? Everybody on the 101 goes 100 miles an hour.
Nobody
goes 70.
Seems like it nowadays. I
Yeah,
agree.
okay.
And then all of a sudden you realize this is going to really affect your insurance.
Yeah.
It's going to have a major effect, And if you go over 100 miles an hour, one of the penalties is the judge can suspend your license. Chris didn't bring this up, but for 30 days. So you can have a suspended license for 30 days, and if you can't drive, what are you going to do in California?
Yeah, yeah.
Now,
is that up to the discretion of the judge, or is that mandatory?
No, it's up to the discretion of the judge.
Okay.
It's not mandatory, but that's one of the various reasons, because there are a lot of, even though traffic tickets are just infractions.
Yeah.
And infractions are, just like parking tickets.
Right. Okay.
They're not serious compared to some of the DUI and felonies that he brought up. At the same time, they have a tremendous effect on your insurance and time and, a lot of things. And it pays to hire an attorney like Chris to represent you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So if you get this, you're going 100 miles an hour, and you're stopped by a radar, and Chris is able to somehow or another discredit the officer and get a dismissal.
Right.
That would be worth it for you, wouldn't it? You agree?
Yes, it would. Yes, it would.
Yeah.
Now, I've heard the story. You probably have too, since you guys were talking about the radar, how it's not always, it's not always correct. Right. I've always heard about they have to be calibrated periodically. A lot of times they're not.
No, they're calibrated.
Okay. Oh, is that?
Yeah.
Or is that, like I said, an urban myth?
No, they use a tuning fork. And they have tuning forks. I think they have a tuning fork at 35 or 40 miles an hour, and then they have a tuning fork for maybe 60.
Yeah, I think Chris was talking about that.
Right.
Yeah.
But they do that at the beginning and at the end of the shift.
Okay.
So during the middle of the shift, they have some sort of internal machine that I guess makes sure that it's working properly.
Yeah.
And one of the things when I'm handling a traffic case, I like to get into that, because the CHP officers or any of the officers out there, they have no knowledge as to how that internal thing is working, and all they can say is that there's some sort of green light that says that it's working. That's all they know.
Yeah.
They have no knowledge as to the internal. They're not, like engineers. They don't learn this at the academy. And it's been an area, I want to explore it more. I think it could be more fruitful.
Yeah.
But I think that having an attorney like Chris is essential.
I understand. I agree. But what about, like I said, the guy gets it, the patrolman, policeman, whatever, gets in his car, turns the machine on, says, it's green, big deal, and just goes on.
Yeah, that happens.
Yeah.
That happens all.
Yeah.
One of the things that happens, and a lot of my clients tell me that I wasn't going 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
I was going, 80 or 85, and I started thinking to myself, is what's happening is that it has this wide, and so you have a car on the slower lane and a car on the faster lane, and it has this wide range, and what it's doing, it's picking up the faster car while you're in the slower car, and it's reading the faster car at 100 miles an hour, but you're going 85. And so you get pulled over erroneously because the officer can't tell which car is which.
Right. I remember he was talking about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is happening all the time.
Yeah.
And, unfortunately, the officer's credibility, you have the officer versus yourself. If you're up there by yourself and, you're Peter, honest Peter, and you've got the officer, who are you going to believe if you're the commissioner?
Yeah, yeah. Now, what about the fabled speed trap?
What's happening?
I know. Well, right near, I live near the Carmel Mission, and if you drive down from the Mission down to Rio Road, there's always seems to be a police car sitting right there because the speed limit is only 25 miles an hour.
Right.
In fact, that's the last time I got nailed. I was going a little too fast. I wasn't paying attention.
Okay.
And he always seems to sit in the exact same place. Didn't notice. Probably a lot of other people, and they get pulled over right then and there.
Right.
Okay. So that's kosher. Nothing illegal about it.
Well, it's not entrapment. I mean,
It's not entrapment.
No,
okay.
It's not entrapment.
Yeah.
I mean, they have the right to be able to sit there, and I had a traffic case where a guy was in Carmel, and I can't remember exact street, but apparently he ran a stop sign, and they had a Carmel police officer just sitting there at the stop sign because that was a place where a lot of people were just blowing through these stop signs. Pulled the guy over.
Yeah.
And so it was completely kosher.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
yeah. Now, what about they see this in the old movies. You go through the little hick town somewhere, and there's you're going 1 mile over the speed limit, and the cop comes flying out of the brush saying you damn speeders, something like that. Anything can be done about that. I mean, let's be honest with each other. As a policeman one time told me, tickets are revenue.
True.
And also, as they have told me, maybe they've told you, my sergeant, my captain would be really mad at me if I didn't give out a certain amount of tickets per month. He thinks I'm just laying down on the job.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you a story, Peter.
Tell me a story.
It happened to me.
Okay.
I was
better you than me.
Yeah, I was traveling from California to Kansas, and I believe we were going through Oklahoma. And as I was driving, the speed limit, it looked like there was a sign that said the speed limit was now 60 miles an hour as opposed to 45 miles an hour. So I accelerate, and all of a sudden I get pulled over by an Oklahoma, some sort of little town in Oklahoma.
Are there little towns in Oklahoma?
There are a lot of little towns. I get pulled over, and he tells me you're going 60. I said, well, I saw this. So, oh, no, you accelerated too soon.
Oh.
Okay. And so it was a nightmare. So then I come back to California. I get a call from the DA in this little town, and and then they try to say, look, you owe us, hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines and fees and all this stuff. Yeah, because it's revenue.
Right, I know.
Because it's revenue.
Yeah.
And
now, do you think they treated you differently because you were not a towner?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, they saw the California driver's the license plate.
So they figure you're rich.
Yeah, I guess.
Yes. Everybody's rich is California. It's the only way you can live here.
Right.
Okay.
You're
all right. So they took advantage of you.
I think so.
Okay.
I was able to sort of negotiate with the DA over the phone, and I ended up paying a fine.
Okay.
You know, I got it reduced somewhat, but still,
How much was the fine? You want to tell us?
I can't remember.
Okay.
You know, this was years ago.
Okay.
But still, you know, this happens. You know, you're
Yeah.
driving through little towns like that, and you're right. You know, you and I'll tell you, Monterey is sort of like that, because you know Monterey's got a lot of one-way streets, and so you get a lot of tourists that come. They have a couple of drinks, and then they get sort of confused as to what's the one-way street or whatever, and they go down the one-way street, and you know the only crime that's really going on in Monterey is DUIs and traffic and things like that, and they get pulled over for traffic and DUIs, and so it's happening here.
Okay, all right. I don't know if this was discussed. If they decide not to get Chris, handle it themselves, go against a judge, what's the criteria? What should they do? What should they not do?
Well, if they want to fight it themselves, then I think what they need to do is they need to write a letter to whatever the agency that pulled them over and try to get as much discovery as they can. Get the police report. It's a pretty brief report. Get the calibration of if it's a radar, get the calibration on the radar, see if it was calibrated properly. If I believe it's got to be within 3 years or 5 years, the radar. I mean, you know, so there's various documents that a layperson needs to get, and I think they talked about drawings and things. I don't really see that in traffic court that much, where there's a lot of drawings. But if you can take pictures of the area, you know, if it's a hidden stop sign or something, I mean, those are kind of things that might help a little bit.
Now, we just got about 30 seconds to go. Let's do a little summation.
Sure. I want to let the audience know that next week we're going to be bringing in another attorney who's going to be talking about dependency law. His name is Ian. Can't quite think of his name right now, but that happens to me.
Ian Fleming. No, he's dead. Okay.
Yeah. All right. But he's going to come in, and the summation, I think, is hire Chris Kane. He's a good attorney. He's going to fight for you. You can see he's fired up. He was fired up today.
Right.
And I'm going to be fired up after this show, because I'm going to go talk to him right now and hire him. I'm going to hire him for me.
I agree. Hire Chris. And John. I think we're done.
We hope that you enjoyed the program and will tell a friend. Please join us next Saturday at noon for more of Hooked on Law. For archives of this program, please go to www.KMBYTV.com. Thank you.
KYA Radio 1260.
No, that's not the right one. This is the right one.
KMBY